All right, welcome back to another episode of the Director's Playbook. I'm your host, Paul Lovelace, and today we're talking about something that impacts every single funeral home, and that's the next generation of funeral directors. So I'm joined today by Cody Walker, Dean of Assessment at Pierce Mortuary Colleges. Cody, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Man, I'm really excited that you're on. I'm a little nervous, actually. The last time I spoke with the dean, it was like the dean of admissions in college, and that's been a minute.
Hey, you must have stayed in college, so it must have turned out okay.
I stayed in a few colleges but that's another podcast, I think.
Understood.
Excited that you're here. For those of you, the folks of our listeners who may not know who you are or know of you, would you be able to give just a brief introduction about yourself and what you do for your organization?
Absolutely. I started out in funeral industry when I was 19 years old. I started helping out a little small town funeral home near my hometown, Mangum Funeral Home in Center, Texas. And actually, my very first real position there was selling pre-need for a little company by the name of FDLIC. But that was
I've heard of it.
Yeah, that was my first job.
That's a great way to get started, Cody.
Yes.
I actually did not know that.
Yes. I very quickly found my real passion was in helping families and with the funerals and everything. And so quickly I knew almost immediately after starting to do that's what I was meant to do. I was meant to be in the funeral profession. So about a year after that, I moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area and started my journey at Dallas Institute of Funeral Service. At that time, there was not an online program. I don't know that there was any anywhere.
There probably wasn't much of an internet back then, I wouldn't think.
It wasn't much. I remember, having to do dial-up to send obituaries for the ones that we didn't fax. But,
yep. Good times right there, Cody. Good times.
Yeah, that's for sure. So after I went to mortuary school, I worked most of my career as a funeral director and bomber in the Fort Worth area. I knew I was meant to be in the funeral industry, funeral profession, but I thought it was something else I was supposed to do as well. So I did go back to school. I finished a degree in psychology. And for that led me to writing continuing education courses for a few different providers. And then that led to teaching at Dallas Institute. And from there, I've taught just about every class in the curriculum at least once. And then I've moved on. I've worked on building new curriculum, and now I'm Dean of Assessment.
I love that. Well, I love how you have your finger on the pulse of the next generation of talent. I mean, that's what we're thankful for, is being able to get funeral directors, the new funeral directors, to come into the profession and help families in the way that really needs to happen. So let's talk about that a little bit. I know this. We have funeral directors come into town all the time, and we hear it time and time again. There's somewhat of a shortage of funeral directors. And I saw a stat recently, you may have seen it too. 60% of funeral directors plan to retire by 2028.
Yes, sir.
So at the same time, the death rate is expected to increase, and something like 3.6 million deaths are expected in the year 2060. So when you have those two trends together, that can pose quite the predicament. So I'd love to get your take on that. What are you seeing? And what are you hearing from either funeral professionals, funeral home owners, funeral directors in that regard?
We hear from funeral home owners and funeral home managers on a regular basis, looking for students, for graduates, for those that are looking for other opportunities. We always have posts on our different social media from funeral homes. There is a shortage. There absolutely is. And I wish I could tell you I knew the answer to it. I don't. I think there's a lot of contributing factors, and I think we have to be cognizant not to ignore those factors because we have to be prepared. There's already a shortage, and it's going to only get worse if we don't address some of those things as a profession.
Yeah, you're right. And I think we can touch on that here in a little bit about some of the ways that we can help attract more people to the profession. But before we do that, I'd love to get your take on some of the trends currently that you're seeing in mortuary school. So let's talk about enrollment. How are things looking in that regard? Can you give us just a broad take on it?
Enrollment is very good, not just with our schools, but across the country. It's increased dramatically over the last few years. And a lot of that is because of distance education, distance learning. Students are able to get their education and fulfill their educational requirements online. Going back to over 20 years ago when I moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area and started Dallas Institute. If that had been a second career for me at that time, or if I'd been married or with kids, I wouldn't have been able to uproot my life potentially to do that. And there's many students out there, or many out there that would have been students that weren't able to, that now can do that through distance education.
So just basically what you're saying is the remote learning capability now is helping attendance. Is that right?
I think it is very much so. And it allows those, especially more non traditional students, those are not just out of high school. They may already have families, they already have career obligations, whether it be in funeral industry or another career. It enables them to get the education they need, quality education, and still fulfill their obligations with their life, with their family, with their work.
Yeah, I'm telling you, that's very encouraging because I look at mortuary schools as like the minor leagues to some degree, right? You're getting ready to go to the big show. You're getting ready to go to the major leagues, and as we've said, there's a demand for that next generation of talent. So that's encouraging, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of people who, a major part of our funeral profession that contributes so much to families and success at funeral homes are those non-licensed personnel that work every day. And distance education also gives them an opportunity for those that wish to continue working in the funeral home where they're needed, but also to pursue their education and become licensed personnel.
Good stuff. Well, I guess what can you tell, I guess, the current funeral home owners, funeral directors out there about the next crop that's coming through? What should they be aware of, be prepared for? What would you like to tell them?
Sure. You know, there's another change that we see and we've seen over the years. Uh, there's there's still a lot of students coming from multi-generational funeral families that own funeral homes or worked in funeral homes, but there's also a lot of first generation students coming through that are brand new to the funeral industry, just like I was when I started. And with that, I think both of those groups bring a lot of value. They bring the tradition uh, from the funeral death care profession, but then there's also those first generation students are bringing a lot of ideas and innovations, and also not bringing a lot of preconceived notions that are going to be very valuable in many years to come, for many years to come. And one thing that funeral home owners, I feel, must do is not discount some of those ideas that are coming out of the student population.
I know we're looking for people that are hungry, that are humble, that are smart, and that'll be the future leaders in our organization. And so I think many funeral home owners are looking for that same thing. And what can you tell them in that regard? Are you seeing folks that fit that description that are coming out of mortuary school these days?
Absolutely. You've got to keep in mind that uh, our purpose in funeral service education is to educate students. Now, along with that, there is training. There's education and training, hybrid, if you will, on how to do services, how to meet with families, how to meet those Federal Trade Commission requirements when you're meeting with a family. But we are not only training individuals to be funeral directors. A lot of that comes from the funeral home side. And so when a person graduates mortuary school, they may have the education they need, but there's also some practical training that has to be applied for those students or those now new funeral service professionals to be adequately equipped. And it doesn't mean a year from now when they finish their apprenticeship, they need to stop learning. We all continue learning every single day.
Such a great point. Yeah, just because you earn your degree doesn't mean you quit learning, right? None of us do. And we've been doing this a long time. And, I know people create value because they understand how there's situational knowledge and there's business acumen, right? And so you can't have everything all at once, and you're learning it through your experience. And I love what you're mentioning about the funeral homes helping with that as they receive these new employees. That's really good. With specifically with the curriculum, Cody, what skills are they learning today? I mean, what are you focusing on primarily, and What are there any gaps that we should be aware of?
Sure. Good question. Now, with the curriculum, a mortuary program, most all mortuary programs are accredited by the American Board of Funeral Service Education. Like, for example, in Texas, you have to graduate an ABFSE program to take national board exam and to become licensed as a funeral director and embalmer. And it's like that in many states. With that accreditation, there are outlines of content that we have to cover. Now, those outlines, obviously, they have to be updated from time to time. They have to be changed. And there's a set schedule on which outlines are reviewed every year. I've been fortunate. I've served on a couple of committees that have had an opportunity to review those outlines. And I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we reviewed the funeral service merchandising outline. Of course, we tweaked a lot of things. We made changes here and there, updates. But one section that we recommended adding was in pet memorialization, because that's something that the industry is seeing. And we're seeing a need for it. People are asking questions about that. Families are. So that's just one example of how we're having to update, and we need to update curriculum to make sure that funeral service professionals are prepared for what the families need and are asking for.
Yeah, that's a good example too. What about technology? Are you seeing, are you preparing our folks with technology, with those kinds of skills, so when they get into the workplace that they're equipped to succeed?
Absolutely. And Paul, that reminds me of something. When I first started selling pre-needs back 20 something years ago, I remember getting this really cool gadget in the mail. It was a Palm Pilot. And I thought, wow, I have made it now. But
Hey,
there's,
that was technology back then,
it
earth shattering.
was, it was cutting edge for
Yeah.
sure. You could beam information from one to another. That was really cool.
Oh
But,
gosh.
you know, we have a lot of technology that is increasing every day, technological advances. The one thing we know about the death care profession, just as in every profession, there will be change. There always has been, there always will be. And we have to embrace that. For example, one of the new courses we just added here recently within the last year is Introduction to Technology. Now, the
Yeah.
first part of that class is helping students bridge a gap, if it exists, on what they need to be successful as a student. Basic things like Microsoft Word and all these different Excel, things of that nature. But then there's also technology related to death care. For example, there's funeral specific software that students are able to use, memorialization videos that they're able to produce, all sorts of multimedia. And that's one way we're starting students to prepare for those things in the ways that we can serve families. And it's from streaming services, that's all things that we can introduce students to, and they can be prepared for it when they enter a time when they're actually serving families.
I'm really encouraged by that. And I heard a quote one time that said, if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance even less.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's so powerful. So changing is good at any stage of your career. So thanks for you guys leading in that way. That's really good. So let's talk about, I know they have to take exams and they have to be licensed specifically. So how is that? How is that going? I mean, is the pass rate high or is it low? Well, what are we looking like in that regard?
And that's something that you hear a lot about, pass rates being down across the board. I know there are a lot of people who may be discouraged about that. I want to go on record and say 100% the MBE National Board Exam, both the arts and science section, they are passable. It's not something that students can't do. I think one way that has harmed pass rates is a lot of talk and a lot of sentiment that they are not passable. And they are. It's hard. Absolutely. I'm not saying it's not hard. It takes a lot of hard work. Uh, just this past week at the convention, we hosted a boot camp, one day for arts, one day for science. And we had students in there that have taken the test multiple times. And They just had to be prepared for it. And one way of being prepared is understanding the exam, understanding what's going to be on it, how the questions are going to be asked. It's not there to trick students. But I think we have to have that positivity too, that it can be done. I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah. So the pass rate, do you know exactly what it is or what it's about approximately?
I would have to look. I can't remember
Okay.
exactly what it is.
No problem. I was really just curious about it.
Yeah, it's, and of course it's different with all the programs that I don't know right off.
But
I
they have
don't
study
know.
courses and study materials. Can I get a tutor? I mean,
Absolutely.
how can I get some tools to help me pass it if I'm a funeral director that's in training or in mortuary school?
Good question. You've got the school that students went to, they've got resources, but you said earlier there wasn't much of internet back then. There is now. And there are resources all over the internet, both free and some that can be paid for, but there are resources. There's sample questions. There's just on YouTube, you can watch videos explaining concepts. And so there's a lot of resources out there for students that have that desire. Now, it's not something that you can say, well, I think I'm going to take off work Thursday and prepare and take the test on Friday. It's harder than that. And one thing that we see, and this is across the board at all schools, the longer a student waits after they finish the program, their chances of passing go way down.
I
Um,
could see that. So there's some advice right there. Take it as soon as you can after
exactly,
graduating.
exactly. And it makes a huge, huge difference in the pass rate.
Good deal. So let's talk about enrollment, if you will, and what you're seeing there. I know when I started, you and I both probably, I bet you was 95% men. And
Mhm.
so I'm seeing some trends that are quite the opposite of that. So what are you seeing these days with regard to enrollment?
Sure. I've had some classes in person in Dallas where I remember one class in particular that were all female when we got toward the end. Um, but there is the student population has shifted dramatically, and I think with that has brought a lot of innovation and change and potential change in the way we serve families from the female side and from all the different demographics, age, education. We are seeing more students. I haven't looked at the numbers, but I feel like we're seeing more students that already have previous college education, whether it be on the bachelor level or master level. And that has made a lot of room for change as well. And I think we'll continue to see that. But you're right, absolutely. When I started in the funeral business, there were female funeral directors, ladies, but it wasn't nearly as common as it is now. Um, Unfortunately, I lost my grandmother just a few months ago, and my grandfather a couple years before that. And I had a female funeral director helping me, and she did an amazing job. A lot of the staff there did,
Yeah, I
and
can
there's
see that. Some of the
definitely,
best funeral directors I know are female, and so I
absolutely,
think it's a great trend. I'm not sure really what's driving it. I know women tend to be more empathetic. They tend to be more, they can connect better on an emotional level. I don't know if that's anything to do with it or not. I'm not a psychologist, but it could be driving some of that. What do you think?
yeah, absolutely. And if you go back, a big changing point in death care in America was the Civil War, right? When we started
Yep.
embalming. But before that, when people in large part took care of their own dead at home, there would often be help from the community, and that help often came in the way of a midwife. That was just kind of a subspecialty, if you will, of midwives.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's just kind of ingrained in the DNA as well.
Let's talk a little bit about um, the future because this is real important. This is the next generation, right? And so, what do you see happening with the evolution of uh, funeral and mortuary school?
I think the basis or the foundation of mortuary schools will continue as they have for many generations. But as we talked about earlier, change is inevitable and we have to embrace it. Every year, we see different changes in education and in funeral service. We have to embrace those things. Just like we were just talking about the shift and increase in female over male demographics. We have to be prepared for that. We have to continue being prepared for that. It's already happening, it's happened, and it's been a good thing. It's been very positive for the industry, in my opinion.
Here's what I want to see, and I mean I don't know. I would love to get your thoughts on this. I think the average funeral director in the United States, their compensation is somewhere between 45,000, 55,000, something like that, depending on where they are. I'd like to see that amount increase to the point where it would attract more people to say, you know what, I can have a career in this. I can make a living doing this. It's a rewarding profession. What are your thoughts in that regard as far as what's happening in the profession?
Absolutely. One thing that I always loved doing, when I was teaching in the classroom on campus, first day of class, new set of students come in. Yeah, I would ask them to introduce. We're talking 7:30 in the morning, first morning. Ask them to introduce themselves, and this won't come as a surprise to listeners, but the and when asked, why are you here? What brought you to mortuary school? Overwhelmingly, the response is something along the lines of, I feel called or meant to do this. And I think most of us in the industry would agree with that. And we have students that may feel that passion to do so, but they may not be able to financially do it. Um, I've had students or potential students I've talked to before, and they want to go to school, but they're going to have to take a pay cut from their current job when they start out as a funeral director. And that's something they may not be able to do for their family. And one class that we have that we just started as well within the past year, it's called Preparing for Professional Success. That's a tongue twister every time. But that course, one of the assignments in there, students have to research what the educational requirements are, license requirements are, all of those things for the actual area they want to practice in. Another thing they have to research in that is what the starting salary is going to be, or it could be. The last thing we want is for a student to go through school for a year or two and spend all this time, money, and effort only to find out maybe they had this preconceived notion they're going to start out at 200,000 a year, and that's just not reality. And we want them to find out now. But we can't expect all quality people to be willing and able to make a sacrifice to the salary range like you mentioned.
Yeah,
It's not.
I think, I mean, we've always believed in hiring on potential and rewarding on performance,
Mhm.
right? And so the performance has to be there at some point, but the economics are such that the demand's going to be high enough, hopefully, where the best and brightest are going to be compensated well, and that's the way it should be. And so I don't see any reason why a licensed funeral director couldn't make uh, double what that average is at some point, depending on, again, where they live, what their situation is, because the benefits have to outweigh the costs at the end of the day in any business, right? And so a funeral home owner has to say, I can't pay somebody $100,000 to meet with 40 families a year.
Mhm.
They need to, the economics have to be there too.
Yes.
But where I was going with that is I really think that could happen in the future. As demand increases for their skill set, the more valuable you are in the marketplace, the more compensation that you will earn. And that's just a fact of life.
Absolutely. And that's not just from, like we've talked about before, it's not just from mortuary school. You have to continue to learn and increase your trade set, your skills. And that's something we're increasing every day, whether it be through continuing education, through experience, through other education. There's a lot of opportunities out there.
Yeah, especially for people who get it. When they get why funerals matter and they get the difference that they're making in families' lives, then someone's going to recognize that and they're going to compensate them for that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
One thing I just came into my mind about the different types of license. I know some states have multiple licenses. So in Texas, you can be a licensed funeral director, embalmer, right? There's other sub degrees of licenses.
Mhm.
So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, should they have a standardized kind of licensing breakdown? Should there be reciprocity between different states? What are your thoughts?
Sure. And there are different requirements, of course, in different states. In Texas, you can be a funeral director or you can be a funeral director and embalmer. And then you have other states, Georgia, for example, they just recently, it's always been you had to be a funeral director and embalmer. And now, I don't know that it's gone into effect yet, but you'll be able to be just a funeral director. You got states like Arkansas where you can become a funeral director without going to school. There's other ways of becoming a funeral director, not an embalmer, but a funeral director. Then you've got states like California, and I know several others, where you can be a funeral arranger, and that is, predominantly training by the funeral home that you
Right.
work in. Um, there's different ways of looking at that, in my opinion. I think, as I said earlier, the non-licensed staff that we have at funeral homes are incredibly valuable to what we do, and we can't overlook their value. And we have to, in my opinion, funeral home owners and managers should be putting resources into that demographic as well.
Love it. Well, so anything new in the mortuary college space that, any new affiliations or collaborations, anything new that you want the audience to be aware of today?
There's a lot of things that are coming that come slowly. Like we're exploring some different options of course, there's some AI in everything that we do. We're also looking at some virtual reality programs where a student can use virtual reality to experience embalming and things of that nature. So I think that's going to be a game changer. I remember when I was in school all those years ago, we would have students occasionally that had never seen a body, and when they saw one, they said, "This is not for me." And anyone that's going to have a revelation like that, we would rather them have that in the beginning instead of spending money and time and effort to get to the end to realize that it's not something they want to do.
I'd love to know the ideal candidates, what you're seeing, what you're trying to mold for the future, just so our funeral home owners and funeral directors out there can know what's coming in the future.
Sure. I think the ideal candidate for a funeral home owner is, first of all, they've got to fit in with the culture of the funeral home. They've got to be willing to fit in the and on the other side of that, the funeral home has to be, willing to let them into their culture, the corporate culture, the work culture there, the familiar culture. And but I think one of the biggest things for students or graduates is those that are willing to learn and to continue to learn. Like I said, graduating from a funeral service education program, that is the educational requirements, and it's very, very important. Don't get me wrong. We're also having practical requirements. We have funeral director practicum requirements. On the embalming side, we have clinical embalming requirements. But all of those take participation from licensed funeral directors and funeral homes as well. And so to find those graduates or those students who are willing to continue to learn and better themselves in service to families, it's very important, I think.
Well, I love that you mentioned culture, and I think that's really key that current owners need to be open minded and they may have to change some things in their own regard. For example, they may have to be, I know tattoos can be controversial and those kinds of things. And, it's a very sensitive profession that we're in, but by the same token, you've got people that have good hearts that might be being stereotyped because of some body image or something, and I don't think that's fair. And so I'm hoping that changes for the better, and you'll look at someone's heart and how much they care and the work that they actually do versus what. Now, I do realize there's balances, right? You've got to be able to maintain a certain level of professionalism in everything we do. But the people that I'm in contact with that are that younger generation, they're even younger than millennials. So what would that be? Generation Z, I guess. I mean, they are hardworking, they're energetic, they have good ideas. Yeah, their ideas are different than my ideas, and I don't always understand the language that they use. When they say they're bussing or slaying or whatever, I don't understand all that stuff. But I don't think that really matters. I think it's just communication preferences.
You know,
But I think they have great hearts by and large, and I hope that. What is your feeling in that regard?
absolutely, I do. Now, you know, I started in Deep East Texas, 27 years ago. You could wear any color shirt you wanted with your suit as long as it was white or blue. I mean, that was kind of the way it was. Uh, it's very conservative. I think the death care profession still needs to be conservative on some levels, but in many ways, we have to accept that there is change in culture, um, universally speaking. Now, someone with facial tattoos on their neck and piercings, they may not fit into every funeral home in Abilene, Texas, you know, but there's families out there that are experiencing death that could feel more comfortable with a person with that appearance than they would with someone wearing, the black suit, white shirt, and red striped tie.
Yeah.
They're and it's about that culture fitting into that culture and knowing what to expect.
Well, even if it's a small thing like just listening to their opinions and letting them be involved and
Mhm.
trying some new things. I mean, those sound very minor, but I think it's possible that that could help, cooperation and improve culture. That's what made me think about that. All right, well, good deal. Well, let's turn our attention here, I guess, to some advice that you might give to current funeral home owners, current funeral directors, in regards to being more receptive to that next generation of talent.
Sure.
What advice would you share with our funeral professionals today?
By all means, I think a funeral home owner has to know their families, what would be best for their families, for their communities. And it can be easy to be stuck on those traditions and not look past them. But we do have to consider not only the families we're serving now, but the families we're likely to serve in the future. And especially take into consideration those ideas that students may have. We have some brilliant students coming in, as we always have, and not just in funeral services, but they're bringing ideas from life. They're bringing ideas from social media and technology that someone old like me, I couldn't imagine, some of the things that are considered now. And we have to take those in consideration. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was, I mean, you ask somebody, can you stream a service? No, we don't know any way to do that. Now, just about anybody could do it on some level. And we have to take that into consideration on what we can do and what students can help us, our new graduates can help us learn and offer our families.
Well, Cody, I'm fired up about funeral service, especially the future. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been an honor to host you here. Thanks for shedding light on that next generation of talent and where funeral education is headed. To all our listeners today, thank you for tuning in. If today's conversation gave you any new insights or some inspiration, we'd love for you to let us know at the Director's Playbook at funeraldirectorslife.com. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care, everybody.